I was lost in a national park. Those were the scariest and most bizarre 2 days of my life. On my 17th birthday, I ran away from home. It was just my dad and I. He'd physically abused me for years and blamed me for my mother's death. I knew that no one would come looking for me. My plan was to hitchhike to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park with just a razor, a bag of Oreos as my last meal, and a jug of water. I left that morning before dawn, fully knowing that he wouldn't be awake for another 2 hours. My plan was to walk as far as I could before asking for a ride. However, I had a minivan pull over almost instantly. "Need a ride, hun?" It was a woman who appeared to be in her mid-30s. She had 2 kids in the back, a girl around the age of 7 and a boy no older than 4. "Sure, that'd be great," I said, taking the seat in the front. I liked this woman. I planned to be picky with who my hitchhiker was, knowing that they were going to be the last person that I ever spoke to before committing suicide. Let's call her Cindy. She told me that she'd raised her 2 children, Mark and Emily, all alone. Her husband had died in a car accident 2 years after Mark's birth. This was his favorite hiking spot, she said. She asked me what I was doing all alone. I lied and said I'd just graduated high school and planned to hike around the national park hoping to find myself. She believed that load of crap, or maybe she just knew I was lying and didn't want to call me out on it. Either way, I enjoyed the hour-long drive with them. For once, I felt like I was part of a fully functional family. When we arrived to a nice hiking area, Cindy offered for me to have lunch with them. For a minute there, I almost changed my plans. I thought that maybe life could be worthwhile. This beautiful family was an exception to the rule. I could be that exception too. But I stuck to my plan and continued on, but not before accepting some jerky and a few snacks from Cindy, who was adamant about preventing me from being so skinny. I waved goodbye and searched for the perfect spot to end my life. I thought about just sitting until sunset, deep in the woods, and ending it all. I walked for hours without seeing another person. I hadn't felt content with any of the locations I'd found yet, or maybe I was chickening out. Finally, I found an opening between the rocks that exposed a newly growing area of land filled with wildflowers. I crouched down on a rock and waited, but I grew tired and relentless of waiting. I marked the spot with an Oreo and decided to keep walking around the trail until sunset. It was a particularly hot day that Friday. There wasn't a sign of the wind even rustling in between the trees, but something felt particularly cold. I could hear some whispers coming from beneath the bushes and a young child giggling. "Hello?" I asked, crouching closer to the bush. But before I could do anything else, something pushed me down the hill. When I finally awoke, my head felt cold and filled with intense pressure. I felt the blood dripping from my temple and wiped it on my tank top. Although disoriented, I was still coherent. I looked up to see the child staring up at me. He was around 6 years old and asked me if I wanted to play hide and seek. "Where are your parents?" I asked him. "Come on, I'll show you," he said, giggling as I slowly crawled for a few centimeters before gaining the strength to get up. "Where are we going?" I asked. But he didn't reply. I slowly followed after him. Soon enough, he had become a blur, and I could see the outline of his red t-shirt. He told me to keep going, motioning me forward, but I could feel myself passing in and out of consciousness. "If you don't get up, they'll find you like they found me," he whispered. I passed out cold. By the time I woke up, it was dark. My plan would have to wait. I needed to find the child who was lost in the forest. I wanted to help him above everything else. I called for him. "Boy? Little boy?" I yelled. He never came, but a ruffling in the bushes startled me as I stood up trying to regain my balance. I reached for the razor and held it out. "I have a weapon," I yelled. It was a shadow of a person, an older woman around the age of 40. Her bushy hair was covered in twigs as I saw her teeth shine in the dark. She was either smiling or growling. "Who are you?" I asked. "Who are you?" she replied. "I'm looking for my daughter." I remember mumbling, saying I didn't see a girl, only a young boy. I asked her if we could stick together, but she ran off. I stood up and tried to chase after her, but she disappeared. Then I heard a loud sound coming from the woods. It was some sort of siren or foghorn. I trembled and covered my ears. This continued for 10 minutes. I sprawled into a ball on the ground until it stopped. Then I ran. I grabbed my jug of water, took a few sips, and continued running. I ran until I grew exhausted and couldn't run anymore. That's when I saw the little boy again about half a mile away. He pointed to the left of me and continued running. I slowly walked after him, dragging my legs and forcing myself to walk. I made my way to a shallow stream and continued on the creek's path. That's when I saw a tattered red shirt similar to the little boy's that I had just seen. Except this one seemed far older and abused over time. It hung in the trees as the slight breeze moved it back and forth. I heard more whispering around me. This time it was various voices. "Where's my daughter? I'm so cold. Don't come looking for me." Then they all went quiet as I heard a slowly moving heartbeat that finally stopped. I screamed for someone to show themselves, but the voices just stopped. From a distance, I heard the little boy laughing. I continued up the creek until ending up at the same spot I had started at near the wildflowers. How did I end up back there? I looked at the sun, still fully luminescent in the sky. I reached for the switchblade and stared at the metal's reflection in the sun. I thought about the little boy. I wondered where he was and what fucked up game he was trying to play with me. I threw the blade off into the hill and started crying. That's when I heard footsteps coming around from behind me. Amelia? It was Cindy and her 2 kids. I asked what she was doing out so deep in the woods. "We followed a lost boy who said he needed help," she said. I didn't tell Cindy about the past 2 days. Instead, I drove up with them to Arkansas. It's been a year since I was lost in the forest, and not a day goes by that I don't think about that little boy and wondered what happened to him and who he was running from.